You are now live.
Okay. This is Senate Appropriations Committee, and this afternoon we're going to start our work with testimony from our state college system regarding the governor's proposed budget adjustment. So we have the Chancellor and two of her staff here to walk us through what is being included in this budget adjustment request. So welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you. Chancellor Zatny, you're going to take the lead in the presentation, or are you deferring to Sharon? However you want to do it is fine.
Well, I'm going to kick it off. We have some slides that Catherine will be sharing, and then we're going to tag team as we go through it. So,
fine.
So yeah, thank you so much for the invitation to meet with you today. As you noted, Chair Kitchell, I've got joining with me today to discuss our Budget Adjustment Act request is Sharon Scott, who's our Chief Financial and Operations Officer, and Catherine Lavassa, our Director of Governmental and External Affairs. So first, we do want to thank you for the significant investment that the state made in the Vermont State College system, both in FY21 and FY22. And thanks to your leadership, the system is on a path towards financial sustainability, and we are undergoing significant transformation to meet the higher education needs of Vermonters into the future. So enrollment at the Vermont State Colleges was strong this fall. So while we've not returned to our pre-pandemic levels, our full paying equivalent enrollment is 11.3% better than was budgeted for the fall semester. And we welcomed back over 10,550 students to our campuses. Additionally, enrollment of Vermonters is currently 6.5% better than budget, and out-of-state enrollment is better by 12%. All three of our residential institutions are experiencing, as had been expected, a drop in enrollment for returning students, and this is likely due to the smaller incoming classes in the fall of 2020. CCV's new student course placements are currently up by 16% year over year, and their overall fall enrollment is more than 31% better than budgeted. CCV's enrollment was very positively impacted by the 802 Opportunity Scholarship, which is administered by VSAC, and the Workforce 2.0 program. So as you know, the pandemic did disproportionately impact our students, many of whom are economically vulnerable and face both housing and food insecurity. Additionally, the spring 2020 proposal to shutter three of our campuses did create considerable uncertainty regarding the long-term viability of each of our existing campuses. So we have been working hard to overcome this, but the impact has been felt most keenly at Northern Vermont University. We find it's very tough to overcome a negative narrative, despite our efforts to create certainty and excitement about our transformation work, as well as highlighting the state's and the board's commitment to our existing campus locations. As we continue moving forward, we appreciate and welcome the continued reassurances that the state can provide to our students and employees of the shared commitment to the ongoing transformation work at the Vermont State Colleges.
So as Chancellor Zatny noted, enrollment is very strong at the Vermont State Colleges this year. Thanks to the vision and the leadership of the governor and the legislature, we were able to offer Vermont learners unprecedented opportunities to access education, courses, and workforce development opportunities at a free or reduced cost this year. While these programs are still underway, we are excited to provide a brief overview of their success so far this fall and their positive impact on our enrollment. In Act 9 of 2021, the state funded a long-term care facility practical nursing program in partnership with the Vermont Association of Hospitals and Health Systems. This program, open to 40 students in 5 locations across the state, is underway, and the students are currently completing their prerequisites at CCV. Next fall, the students will begin their practical nursing courses with our faculty in the long-term care facilities they are currently employed in. We are quite excited by the model this program offers to upskill existing long-term care facility staff and to address the state's healthcare workforce shortage. And we are looking forward to reporting back as the program progresses. Also in Act 9, the state funded a workforce upskilling initiative, and this was modeled on the successful CRF initiative from fall of 2020. This provided 2 courses to Vermonters impacted by the ongoing pandemic. We launched this initiative over the summer and placed 956 students in 1,642 courses this fall. Of the $3 million appropriation, we've exhausted about $2.3 million and will use the remaining funds for students in courses this spring. In Act 74, the state allocated an additional $2 million for a 3rd workforce upskilling initiative, and we will launch that next academic year.
In Act 74, the state funded 3 other major workforce development initiatives for Vermont State College students: a critical occupations free tuition program pilot, a Welcome Home Transfer Student Scholarship, and a Degree Completion Scholarship. The Critical Occupations Scholarship offered last dollar tuition to Vermonters enrolled in certain essential programs. The funded programs included nursing and nursing pathway programs, early childhood education, electrical and plumbing, paramedicine, radiologic science, respiratory therapy, dental hygiene, and the programs identified as best bets for a good paying job within 18 months by the McClure Foundation. As you know, this program was a hit. We offered this scholarship to new and returning students, and 63% of the students who enrolled in their classes did so after this scholarship was announced. 1,918 Vermonters received a critical occupation scholarship. The median age of those Vermonters is 28 years old, and the median adjusted gross income is $67,000. 85% of the recipients identified as women. Thanks to the Critical Occupation Scholarship, we doubled enrollment in our RN to BSN program at Vermont Technical College. Every seat in Vermont Tech's Associates in Nursing program, which leads to RN licensure across all its sites statewide, is full this fall for the first time in 5 years. Additionally, we have incredibly strong enrollment in our early childhood education certificates and degree programs this fall. We wrote to the emergency board this summer, notifying them that we exhausted the generous funding for this program in mid-July. Thanks to the state's encouragement, we reopened the program and funded the remaining enrolled students. As described in July, we are requesting $2.35 million in the BAA to meet this additional student demand.
The state also generously funded a Welcome Home Scholarship for Vermonters transferring to a Vermont State College institution from an out-of-state school or returning to school after exiting during the pandemic. We welcomed 1,070 transfer students this year. Of those, we were able to offer the Welcome Home Scholarship to 278 Vermonters across all 4 of our institutions. And finally, the state funded a Degree Completion Scholarship for Vermonters with some college credits, but no credential or degree. This scholarship funded up to 30 credits for new students who had a gap in attendance of at least 2 years. We have 122 Vermonters in the program this fall. With the Degree Completion Scholarship, like the Welcome Home Scholarship, we anticipate increased uptake this spring and next academic year, as we will have the opportunity to advertise these scholarships in alignment with the enrollment cycle. I should also note that the state did fund 2 other initiatives, which are administered by VSAC but benefited the Vermont State Colleges. The Green Mountain Grad Program offers a free Vermont State College course for any Vermonter in the high school class of 2020 or 2021, and 802 Opportunity offers free last dollar tuition to Vermonters with a family adjusted gross income of $50,000 or less who enroll at the Community College of Vermont. Overall, as a result, 3,775 Vermonters benefited from these programs and opportunities this year. So thank you very much on behalf of our students. As you saw as we moved through the previous slides, the student responses to these opportunities has ranged from shock to glee. The quotes are from actual students who have benefited from the programs and reflect the impact that financially accessible education can have on people's lives. As the state college system, we are here for all Vermonters. That includes single parents, working Vermonters, first-generation Vermonters, those with financial challenges, and more. The notes that you saw were from just a few of our program participants this fall, but I can assure you that we've been as grateful and as excited as the students with the support that we received from the state this year.
So in Act 74, the state allocated significant funds to the Vermont State Colleges. These consist of the annual base appropriation of $30.5 million in general fund, a $5 million increase to the base appropriation in general fund, the bridge funding needed to help us address our structural deficit in the amount of $21 million in ARPA dollars, $20 million in one-time funding to address our transformation needs in general fund, and $12.4 million in ARPA and general fund dollars for workforce development, scholarship, and free tuition opportunities for our students. And those are the ones that we just briefed you on. The total allocated to the VSCS in Act 74 between general fund and ARPA dollars was $88.9 million. The Vermont State Colleges respectfully request that you consider 4 items for the Budget Adjustment Act. I believe you may have heard from Commissioner Gresham on items 1 and 2, and we will cover all 4 today. As outlined previously, the state generously approved $5 million for the Critical Occupations Free Tuition Program pilot. And this awards last dollar tuition. So that is tuition after state and federal gift aid. So that is after aid such as Pell or other gift aid made available to students. So last dollar tuition to students enrolled in certain essential career programs. You may recall that we wrote to the Emergency Board in July requesting those additional funds in order to meet student demand. We are very grateful that the state encouraged us at that time to fund the additional demand in the nursing programs up to $2.35 million and to fund the graduate mental health program. We greatly appreciate your consideration of our request for these additional funds that will allow us to make this affordability initiative available to even more Vermont students.
Second, in Act 80 of 2019, Vermont Technical College was charged with evaluating how to deliver associate degree programs at career and technical education centers statewide. Vermont Tech completed the required study and submitted it to the legislature in early 2020. Due to the pandemic and the resulting impact on higher education and on the state, the second part of the Act 80 charge, which was a pilot of delivering associate programs, did not move forward. Vermont Tech has just over $169,000 remaining from that appropriation. Therefore, we're asking to be able to move forward with the second part of the work and use those funds to study and pilot the delivery of up to 2 programs in 2 CTE centers with a report due to the legislature in 2023. So to be clear, we're not seeking any additional appropriation. We're simply seeking authorization to use the existing funds, which are currently sitting at the Vermont State Colleges, to complete the work by delivering a couple of pilot programs. Third, as previously noted,
Chancellor,
yes.
Did the governor's proposed language address that, or is this something that you're asking the legislature, or is this in? We haven't had a chance to go through what the governor presented in the budget adjustment to allow that funding that's available for those pilots. Is there language associated with that we've been given? I'm just trying to clarify the extent to which you might be asking for something of us that is not included in the governor's proposed BAA. That's all I'm trying to understand here. So certainly we knew about the critical occupations. That was wonderful, and we agreed that was a great success story, but the flexibility around that money for the CTEs, that language is in there, or whatever you need to allow you to do it.
Yes, that was included in the recommendation from Commissioner Gresham.
Okay, thank you.
All right, hold on here. Hold on one second.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm just wondering if it was included, was that, as I remember it, there was $8.9 million to VSAC, which I think was to be routed to these programs.
Are you back to Act 80? I'm sorry, Senator.
I'm on the budget adjustment spreadsheet that Commissioner Gresham showed us. As I remember, there wasn't a state colleges line, but there was a VSAC line for 8.9 million, if I remember. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if that's the overall amount, Chancellor, that you're here to request?
Maybe Stephanie can answer that question relative to the spreadsheet, because I don't think the Chancellor would have seen it.
Because we didn't go through the language from the commissioner, but we did go through the spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't seen the spreadsheet. So the total here is, I mean, this is different. The total here that we're looking for is, we're on the second one now. The first one is the additional critical occupations funds. This is 169,000 for this particular piece, for the CTEs that's already with the Vermont State College system. And then the next one also does not involve additional appropriation. And then the last one is an additional one, but we'll get to that one in a moment.
So this
Okay.
is authorizing money that you already have that was
Right.
previously appropriated for this purpose. So
Right,
this is
just-
authorizing language, no additional funding. So it wouldn't appear on the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I was just wondering if any of these asks appeared on that spreadsheet in one. form or
I
another.
would imagine the critical occupations would be on here
Okay,
because that's additional funding.
I don't have that up on my screen now, but anyway,
well,
sorry to interrupt
It
you.
is on there.
Pardon
It
me?
is- It is on the sheet. The critical occupations.
Okay. I'm Alice is under what section?
It's under section G 300A. 8. G 300, small a, parentheses, 8, C. And it's 2,350 million, 2,350,000.
Okay, so it is there. That would be, because that's additional money over and above what we appropriated. And the request came and we authorized, the money was there. What this ended up doing is taking more of the appropriation up front and would have left an inadequate amount of money for the second semester. So what we were doing is saying, yes, we will increase it, and so that the money is there to fund the full year. So they weren't deficit spending. It was just that they were spending upfront a higher rate than was anticipated and obligating money that originally was thought would fund second semester coursework. Are we all set on that?
Yep,
Okay, so we'll go on to the next slide then.
Right, so that was the CTE program pilot. The next one is the Welcome Home Scholarship Authorization. With this one, the legislature had allocated $2 million in general fund dollars to the Vermont State Colleges for Welcome Home scholarships. So as I mentioned before, those are available to students who transfer to VSC institutions from out-of-state schools or those who exit school during the pandemic. 278 students have benefited so far from the program, but right now we anticipate that we will have funds left over from this scholarship at the end of FY22. As the funds were general fund, we're requesting authorization to use the funds until expended so that we may offer the scholarship to eligible students in FY23. And we're asking for this authorization now so that we can advertise the scholarship in alignment with our enrollment cycle moving forward.
So we've
Right,
had many
and-
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just want to, once again, this is the language is included in the budget adjustment as proposed by the executive branch.
This language, I don't believe, was included. The
Okay.
CTE language is in the document.
Okay.
All
All right,
that Commissioner
I just
Gresham
want to
sent.
make sure, but obviously the House, you've made this request, so we rely on them to, have dealt with whatever is necessary. So this is no more money. It's just you didn't expend it all and you would like to carry it forward and have the assurances so that you can advertise and get students enrolled. Okay.
Yeah, because
All right.
part of the challenge is our enrollment cycle doesn't align with the state's budget cycle. So it's, we can't really advertise something until we know we have the money, which is in the summer, which then is out of sync with with us trying to recruit students. So
how much do you think will be unexpended that you can carry forward out of the 2 million?
Sharon, do you know the amount on that one?
Catherine, I believe we were estimating around half of the pool. Is that correct? Approximately
Yes,
half.
I believe it's about half the pool will be carried forward to next year.
Okay.
And some of that is, it's challenging to measure at this point because we award and then students choose to accept their package or they choose to transfer. And so right now we've awarded a little bit more than that half, but we believe that about half will be left over once all students are accounted for.
So you would like to have this finalized, or a guarantee or whatever in place in the BAA, simply because of the timing of when you want to award the scholarships and know that you've got the money to fund them.
Right. So this isn't asking for additional money, just that we'd be allowed to roll that money, the money that was already allocated, that we can roll it forward until it's used up.
Okay. Thank you. I think, any questions, committee? I think we understand. We appropriated, in this case, more money than could be used, but we'll carry it forward. In critical occupations, we didn't appropriate quite enough, so we're adding there. If there are no questions, and it's hard to see anybody, all I see is Senator Westman's on the phone. Senator Starr's on the phone. You got to improve your broadband access, Senator Starr.
Yeah, maybe you could make me an appropriations for that.
Yeah.
We'll
Unless there
call
are
it
any questions.
the Welcome Back, Bobby Scholarship.
Yeah, welcome back.
If there's no questions, we'll move on to the next slide then.
Excellent. So we've had many conversations with legislators and members of the administration, our community partners and employers who are really seeking our graduates, and they've been delighted with the success of the FY22 critical occupations programs. And recognizing the success of this first initiative, we included a second initiative we're calling Critical Occupations Plus in our FY23 appropriations request. And we know that state funds are very limited, and we also know how unusual it is to include a request like this in our BAA ask. But we also know that thousands of Vermonters benefited from the workforce development package that was funded in FY22. The financial aid and enrollment cycle, as Chancellor Zadatny was just noting, for our institutions and our students is about 6 months to 1 year ahead of the state's budget cycle, with many of our students making their decisions in the spring and depositing between March and May, often based on scholarship availability. This means that students are deciding right now whether or not to attend a VSD institution next year. In order to be able to advertise scholarships during the enrollment cycle and more positively impact enrollment, we ask that if the legislature is interested in funding Critical Occupations Plus, you consider funding it as part of the BAA, as it would allow us to advertise the scholarships for Fall 22 for the final months of this enrollment cycle and capture many students during their decision-making time. We did make a few adjustments to our proposal to account for some lessons learned over this last year. First, the program adjusts the number of eligible career paths to include the highly needed fields of mechanical and electrical engineering, school psychology, and graduate mental health programs. Second, the program provides funding for eligible non-citizen residents who are unable to access the FY22 program because it used Federal American Rescue and Recovery Plan Act funds. And third, the program provides funding for those nursing students who were unable to access federal financial aid because the nursing degree would have been their second bachelor's degree. Finally, the program establishes income thresholds that match the federal stimulus payment thresholds from 2020. This year's program was incredibly successful. Funding a second round as proposed would cost $10 million. We know that this is a tremendous ask, especially for the budget adjustment, but we also know that 1,918 Vermonters received a free year of college thanks to the first initiative. Advertising and offering this opportunity on our regular enrollment and financial aid schedule can and will make a huge difference to Vermonters.
All right, so 10 million, is that in the governor's proposed?
That is not.
Okay, this is a request that you're making. Did you make the request? And it was not accepted? Or
So
was it going to be part of the, well, we haven't gotten the budget for 23 yet, but what you're concerned about is timing.
We
So,
made the request as part of the FY23 budget ask when we submitted it to Commissioner Gresham this fall. We are bringing it up in the BAA as the budget adjustment better aligns with the financial aid and enrollment cycles for the universities and for our students. And so we do recognize that this is very unusual to make a request of this magnitude and also to introduce a new program at this point in time. But we thought that if the legislature might want to consider funding critical occupations for a second year, that they might consider it during budget adjustment,
okay.
given the constraints on our end.
All right.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator, I can't see you on the screen, but I know it's Senator Baruth.
Okay.
Now I see you.
Well, in general, I'm supportive of all of these things. I would say extremely supportive. I haven't been on the committee long enough to know whether or not the logic of your timing needs should dictate whether we begin a process of introducing new programs and budget adjustment. That seems like something that would require some discussion. But I did want to ask about the non-citizen piece of this. Am I understanding correctly that that would be directed at, let's say, people in the refugee resettlement program in the Burlington-Winooski area, among others?
It would be directed at individuals who are not currently eligible for federal financial aid. My understanding is that those in the federal resettlement program would actually be eligible under the refugee resettlement program for federal aid. But we do have other individuals who are living and residing in the state of Vermont who are not eligible for federal aid due to citizenship reasons. So it would be directing the aid towards those individuals.
And if I could just ask, do you have some sort of ballpark estimate about what is the population size that you're looking at there in terms of?
And based on the number of inquiries that we receive on a monthly basis, we're estimating somewhere between 75 and 100 students for the year.
I see.
So they could be children, for example, of workers who are here in the agricultural sector, for example.
That is correct.
Well, that's the other place that you begin to think about is the migrant worker population.
Yeah.
And again, I'm very supportive of bringing that demographic into these programs. It does, you know, on the federal side, there's that bar to it, but it does involve us in some of the sorts of discussions we have around non-citizen voting, let's say, or just to note that may not be a perfectly smooth discussion.
Understood.
Well,
Okay. So, and you presented obviously this request as well to the House committees. I assume both to the Education and because they and the Appropriations Committee.
So far, we've presented it to the Appropriations. We haven't been in front of Education yet.
Okay. I know that as a matter of practice, they generally ask their subject matter committees to weigh in. So,
They did invite Kathleen James from the House Education to the meeting in front of House Appropriations.
well, okay. I know that Representative James was, she communicated the concern about the three independent CTEs, but I guess, but she was there in front of the committee, I guess, with more than one request. Okay. All right.
And-
Other questions of the Chancellor?
I had
Yes.
one, Jane, if I may.
Yeah, Senator Starr.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not on the screen. Anyways, do you think it's right though to give like $10 million toward non-citizens, and we still have a large number of our own students that are not being entered into through scholarship programs to the state colleges? I mean,
I think
that's
that we
gonna
need
be
to
a
make
rough
that clear.
sell.
The $10 million is for all of the students and for all, so of which is a very relatively small number that would fall into that category. So I think it's really important. We're not, the request is not 10 million specifically for that group of students. It's for expanding the critical occupations to more areas, allowing for, if you've got a bachelor's in history and you want to be a nurse, I guess then you could, you would qualify. Right now you can't. So the 10 million is really, has many, many components. So it's important to get that clarified. So I appreciate you're asking that question, Bobby.
Yeah.
But do you want to expand on that?
No, I just wanted to make sure that we were, dealing with our own people up front. No, I don't mind helping, because that people can take care of the.
I think that was Senator Baruth's reference. That we'll take a look at that particular piece of it. But the 10 million is
for all.
Is for to address educational needs for a broader array of critical occupations, and also to deal with some of the obstacles that prevented certain students from getting assistance. But if you want to expand on that, or if I didn't state it correctly, please feel free to add to that.
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Jane.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the amount that would be covered by the non-citizen Vermont residents, and again, they would need to be residents of Vermont, is around $400,000. Is that, yeah, that is
correct.
That was a question I had before as well.
Okay. So that helps out of the 10 million. What?
Small.
Other questions?
I think Senator
Senator
Westman.
Westman.
Yeah.
So the money is a question of timing on the 10 million. It very well might be in the governor's budget. When would you normally see yourself awarding money from that 10 million? Would it be in March? Would it be in May? What is the timetable that you see in that process?
So we typically begin awarding our financial aid packages in November as students begin applying for aid for new students, so for incoming students. For returning students, that work typically begins in March for awarding scholarships. But for the purposes of new students, we try to award those scholarships to them as early in the admission cycle as we can, because they're starting to make those decisions. But March would be when we would really need to be able to make the awards.
So for the fall students that are coming, we're already past the November date. So it would be sometime in March that would affect the students coming in January.
It would be in March for the students coming in January, as well as for students who are contemplating whether they can continue into the fall semester. So many students still have to make a decision about whether they're willing to re-enroll. Unfortunately, many of our students are ones for whom economics and access to funds for being able to go, as you so well know, is really one of the key reasons.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see so the 10 million really is for the second semester, starting in the second semester of the next.
It can have a very positive impact on incoming students for the fall semester. Our students typically are making their decision between March and April and May. So they have packages. Some of them already have packages now if they've completed their FAFSA, but they can still, we would still revise packages up at this point. And it will still have an impact on their ability to start.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful.
Other question, Senator Burr.
I have a general question about enrollment, but I'm willing to wait with it if you're not done with these nuts and bolts asks, because it's a more overarching question.
All right, so why don't we finish up on the 10 million? Any other questions about that? We've got the timing, sort of the little bit more of specificity in terms of what certain provisions would cost. Don't see any hands up. So do you have, is that the last of your requests?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, we finished our presentation. Yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
So then we'll open it up. Senator Baruth, ask
All
your
right.
more overarching question.
Okay, so I'm very tempted to say that your presentation proves something that I've believed for a long time, which is that we have funded the state colleges so poorly comparatively to other states that we've priced ourselves out of the market. And so now when we put in money and we direct it to individuals and we show them we're going to be able to drop your costs, we get strong enrollment in these programs. So that's very encouraging to me. The overall question is, if you remember back at the beginning of the pandemic, we were doing kind of doom and gloom modeling, and I'm talking here about UVM as well as the state colleges. In a worst case scenario, enrollment might crash in a historic way. Residential colleges might go away altogether. People were really talking horrible follow-on effects from the pandemic. Instead, what we've seen at UVM is historic enrollments, and what you're talking about are large increases year over year in your enrollments. So I'm wondering, is this part of a national mid-pandemic trend where enrollments are increasing across the board, or is it something that's happening in Vermont and not elsewhere? Is it got something to do with specifically the investments we're making, do you think? Or are we benefiting from in the same way that when we had the Great Recession, we had, national drops in enrollment, especially in arts and sciences? Are we experiencing a national rise in enrollment coming out of the pandemic? And does that factor into your thinking about these things?
Yeah, I don't think we are. We're still very conscious of the demographics that we're confronting. It's been really interesting. I mean, one of the statistics we gave you before was that we've seen a greater increase in the number of out-of-state students enrolling versus Vermonters. So I think that when you asked before, is it national or state, I think there's a benefit that Vermont definitely received from being viewed as a safe place by parents of students, because UVM obviously saw record enrollment. We did see an uptick, a larger than expected uptick in out-of-state students. But for us, that's a much smaller number because we primarily serve Vermonters. Vermont Law School saw an uptick in enrollment. I think that was a result of the pandemic, seeing that. Our numbers are not back to where they were pre-pandemic. We had already anticipated some decrease in enrollment. And again, we're going to have to deal with that smaller class that entered in 2020. We're going to be graduating larger classes, and we've got smaller classes working their way through the system. So we're going to have that with us for some time. So we definitely saw, the real story out of our enrollment numbers is the Community College of Vermont, because across the country, nationally, community colleges saw their enrollment drop dramatically, like 30%. We bucked that trend, and I think that is absolutely attributable in large part to the actions of the state and the support that we received. And so it was helped initially by the McClure Foundation gift that they gave to UVM, gave to CCV, where they doubled their high school numbers entering in the fall of 2020. And then these other programs, I think, have really benefited the Community College of Vermont. And so I do think that is a story coming out of Vermont that's very different than what's happening at community colleges nationally. And I think it is driven in large part by making the community college more affordable, because the other critical piece is we are the most expensive community college in the country. So I do think that's had a depressing impact in terms of recruitment at CCV. But again, having these programs where people can see, particularly because a lot of the programs that have been supported by the state are programs where people don't come out and make a lot of money. So if they, I think the fact that you're making it free or reducing the cost of it means people are more willing to do it. But otherwise, if they have very high amounts of student debt and they're looking at careers like early childhood education or whatever, where they're not going to make a lot of money coming out, that's been a disincentive. So I think having the targeted scholarships has really helped for those particular, employment opportunities. So yeah, I think it's a little quirky. I would be hesitant to say, oh, we're clearly on the upswing. I think we're still confronting significant challenges on the demographic front, but affordability is absolutely a critical issue, I think, for Vermont as well.
And there is evidence to absolutely suggest that price sensitivity is a huge factor. And our price is very difficult for the average Vermonter to be able to address.
Except under these programs.
Except under these programs, which is wonderful.
Yeah. Senator Westman, you had your hand up?
So I living in a county where we do have a campus, and I hear this quite frequently. How widespread are the programs that we're offering, these individual programs, understood by people working on the campuses and working in the state college system around?
That's a good. We've certainly tried our very best to inform everyone. We keep everyone, all our employees are informed about the success we had and the support we had from the legislature. And for these particular programs, certainly our financial aid officers are fully informed, and the admissions folk. Again, I think some of it is challenging because, as we've talked about, the enrollment cycle. It's a little harder for admissions and marketing to really promote programs, because by the time we know we're getting them, we're a little bit further down the line. People have already made decisions. But Catherine, do you have a...
Yes, I think it's important to note that the Chancellor's office and the transformation teams have released transformation updates every other week to the entire VSC community. So this touches not only on the scholarships and the state support received this year, but the entire work of transformation that's been ongoing since receiving the state support. We've also engaged in a number of campus town halls, both virtual and in person, as COVID restrictions and such have allowed, to really make sure that everybody in our communities is aware of everything that is going on, their opportunities for impact, who's involved on the various teams, and with the various responsibilities. But it frankly was a slight challenge this summer to get the programs that were funded up and running, especially on the financial aid side, because we were reissuing some financial aid packages and such to students. Tremendous opportunity for the students, but it did, with the funding coming in June and enrollment starting in August, it did create a little bit of a crunch period, which you might be referencing. That's one of the reasons that we are potentially seeking the opportunity with the BAA, so that there's a little bit more time to spread that out. But we're trying, with campuses all over the state and remote locations all over the state, we're trying very hard to make sure that communication is as transparent and as often as possible.
And I can say Senator Bruth and Senator Kitchell, but our whole committee, I think, has been very supportive of everything that we could do to get through this and to help get to a transformation in a healthier place for the whole system. there's been a real push from that. But when faculty members and people across the system start every conversation from the negative and not, these are the programs that you've put in place that you've got to find a way to continue to fund. I was in a select board meeting in Johnson, and the lead off was how terrible we've been, and it's just a downer for everybody in the room. And I want to start it with, we're working to make it better, and that's why I appreciate your presentation here today. It was I really appreciate the way you brought this to us.
Well, I think sometimes I love that sign, with no whining and a big X through it. We oftentimes lament what we don't have rather than say, this is what we have and this is how we can build on it to make it better. So it starts out with how you want to present it. I think we've got a good infrastructure. The question is, how do we, this transformation process, which is difficult, certainly, because it involves change, it makes tough decisions, and how that process is going and who's paying attention to that progress. And I guess, Senator Baruth, you're paying attention to it. You were on that committee.
Trying.
You try. And I guess while we're on that, it would be helpful. More money went into the base, as you noted, and how we're getting toward that, end point of getting a more stable system. And if you want to give us an update on how that is going in terms of, you say you're doing these updates every couple of weeks that are because the communication and information around what people have is critical, because if you don't have the information, you always assume the worst, which is human behavior. So if you want to use this opportunity just to give us at this time how you feel things are going.
I'd love to. Yeah, it is. I mean, I think that you just can't communicate enough, I think, is the lesson I have learned. We communicate over and over again. We level set, we repeat. So we have, as Catherine mentioned, I do a Chancellor's update every 2 weeks that we get out. And we send it out to everyone, faculty, staff, students. We post everything on our website. We have a transformation website. We are just in the process of launching a new microsite on transformation, which will make it a little easier, be more accessible and less clunky. I meet with our union leaders every month to keep them apprised. I've met with faculty assemblies. I've met with faculty senior leadership. What else? All our board meetings, obviously everything is public and we share all the materials on that. We have a student advisory council that we created that's been absolutely fantastic. We allowed students to nominate themselves or any student to be nominated by faculty and staff. We've had a tremendous group of students who we meet with. It varies, around exams and things, but basically a couple of times a month. They've been absolutely invaluable in providing feedback. We have a very diverse group of, commuters, residents, in-state, out-of-state, part-time, full-time. They've been wonderful. And so, again, we have these over 200 employees working on different transformation teams. We had over 85 faculty working over the summer on what the program array will be for the new institution. We have a number of faculty leaders that are working on what the governance will look like for the new institution. Again, like over 200 folks working on a multitude of different teams. We have 4 main project teams and then sub teams under each of those, which it really is a reboot from the ground up. I mean, we're looking at our IT systems, we're looking at all our back office procedures, the student experience, what will that look like moving forward? We're really looking to create this hybrid university concept. So we're looking to maintain our existing campuses, but, we have small numbers of students on the campuses. So we're looking to create the most robust academic programs we can create and make sure that students have access to those programs statewide. So that will involve, we're calling it face-to-face plus. So we will be continue to offer in-person face-to-face classes, but provide the ability for students to also be accessing those classes remotely. So it could be either telepresence, doing it synchronously at the same time, it could be asynchronously doing it sort of on your own schedule, but really trying to meet students where they're at and being as flexible as we can be to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students as we move forward. It was really fascinating. We met with, again, our Student Advisory Council, and even those students that are in traditional campus settings, in person, playing athletics, doing all the student life things. It was fascinating that every single one of them from Castleton, for example, were also taking an online course. So I think even the students that want in person, they also want the flexibility that can be provided by having access to, a remote or virtual option on occasion. So it's, it's, as Catherine mentioned, we've done town halls. We've got another series of town halls scheduled coming up. I don't know. I'm sure they've missed things, Catherine and Sharon. If you have other things you want to add, I know we're getting close to the end of our time here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I will just say that we've had a number of markers that we've hit this fall that we've set for ourselves. We established the mission and the vision of the new university. We've established the name of the new university, which will be Vermont State University, unifying Vermont Tech, Northern Vermont University, and Castleton under one name and accreditation. The academic unification work, so to bring the academic programs together into departments, has gone very well, and there is continued work on that this winter and spring. And I believe, Sharon, was I talking to you right before this call about a call with our one of our bond agencies? And I don't want to put you on the spot, but
right, we had an excellent call with one of the bonding agencies who were really excited about the progress that the Vermont State Colleges is making, but more importantly, we're really incredibly favorably impressed with the level of support coming from the state of Vermont. It was heartening, and I was really glad that they recognized it.
The other big project that we have moving on right now is working on what's called a substantive change proposal that will go to our accreditor, the New England Commission on Higher Education, for approval of the new university. So that also is a huge amount of work that's currently underway, because there are certain accreditation standards that we have to meet, and the new university will have to meet. So we're working on that as well at the present time.
A lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah. Other questions? We're getting close to 2, and we appreciate the information that we got. We'll be seeing you back again, I'm sure, once we're working on the big bill. Anything else, committee? All set? I'm just checking my.
I would just note that I did file a bill which has now gone to finance to direct the substantial portion of the cannabis excise tax proceeds to the state colleges. You may already be aware of that. If not, finance hasn't indicated yet if or when they'll be taking it up, but they may contact you for testimony on that.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
We very much appreciate the support. We really do.
Well, we have progress to make on the base. That was $5 million last year, but that was only that wasn't the final installment, I don't believe, in the plan.
No,
so we have more progress, have to make more progress there. All right. Well, thank you very much. Friday afternoons, it may be a tough time to come in, but we are plugging away, and the House plans to have the budget adjustment. They want to vote it out. I think the 20th, 19th and 20th or 20th, whatever that Thursday and Friday. So we hopefully we'll get something moving, and we'll, and I'm sure you made the $10 million request to them. So it'll be interesting to see what action they take as well before we get the bill. So again, thank you. And I'm going to then suggest that we move on to the Agency of Human Services.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another
Thank
big
you,
system.
folks.
Thank you.
Were we listening?
Okay, well, we have the agency secretary teams room, a whole room. Chrissy, are they in the waiting room or are they here?
No, they are actually here in the room, and there's Rich Donahue, and we also have the secretary's office. So they should be joining us shortly.
Okay.
No.
They're not on yet?
Hi, Rich. Rich, is the rest of the crew in the secretary teams room?
I'm not sure if they will be dialing in separately or if they will all be in the secretary's conference room. I'm sorry, I don't know, Chrissy.
No, that's fine. Here I can see Ina Backus is coming in separately now. And Rich, another quick question for you while we're gearing up. Would somebody be sharing their screen from your office?
We can certainly share a screen. I know that House Appropriations preference is not to share a screen, and apologies, we weren't aware that Senate Appropriations preference.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, they can do both. So that's fine too. Senator Kitchell, are you guys okay looking at the documents individually?
Sure.
Okay, good. Great.
But we're happy to adapt to the committee's preference.
Thank you. And Secretary Samuelson has just joined us as well.
I have to say, we get so many emails. By the time we need to get back to them, you have to go through about 50 emails to find the attachments, Chrissy.
You know what? I'm happy to resend them right now to the whole crew. I got them handy.
Oh, no, I've got it. I found it. You sent it at 11:52 a.m. this morning.
Okay, great. Does anyone else on the committee need a copy, or are you all set?
Easier if you send it again,
Sure, I'll send it to you, Senator Nika.
please. It would be nice.
We're probably the best document to work through, Rich, is the AHS budget adjustment overview. Is that the one you're going to start with?
The budget adjustment slide deck, that is the actual PDF presentation.
It's the first attachment in what I sent earlier today.
Yeah, the slide deck. I've got it.
Great.
Okay. We all, Ina was on. We have Jenny Samuelson. We have Rich. Is there anyone else that needs to come on before we start?
Sarah Truckle has also joined us.
Okay. Is Sarah still with DCF? Everybody keeps moving around.
Senator Kitchell, she's the Director of Field Services and Operations at the Agency of Human Services. She has moved and changed positions.
Oh, okay. All right. It's hard to keep track. Are you prepared to start? Why, obviously your staff knows what you're presenting, so why don't you start? I don't know who's,
Senator
we'll start
Kitchell,
with the slide deck, and if people have that now, Alice, do you have that document now?
I have the document, not at the right place though. I have the document. What's the title on it?
Well, it's called slide deck. It's
Is this
called AHS fiscal year 22 BAA SAC slide deck.
Senator, would it be easier if I shared my screen?
But whatever the chair desires.
Okay, why don't we fine, we've looked at each other long enough, so we can go to the slide deck and give a break. My hair's looking worse as the day goes on, so let's go. We'll let you put up the slides and we'll work from there.
Okay.
Why are you laughing, Senator Westman?
well, like,
I know you're not looking as fresh as you did this morning either, Senator Westman.
I was laughing. I didn't look fresh this morning.
All right, with that, we're going to start with the overview. And are you, Jenny, are you the presenter, or whomever is the designated person? We'll start with this screen and keep going.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. As we, Chair Kitchell, as we move through our technology challenges that we're having today, so I appreciate it. What I'm going to do, this is Jenny Samuelson. I'm the interim secretary for the Agency of Human Services. And as noted, I have my colleagues Rich Donahue here and Ina Backus. Our preference at your discretion is that I will start off giving a general overview of our BAA for BAA Part 1. I'll hand it over to Rich to go through the more detail by each department that we have in the slide deck, and then come back and do an if we, at your discretion, do an overview of BAA Part 2, delving in with a little bit more detail, and then can end with BAA Part 2 dealing with retention and recruitment. Does that work for you, Senator?
It's fine. We have until 3. I have another meeting at 3. So if we have to schedule testimony again, because there are a number of areas that we want to, would like to talk maybe in more detail than we have time. One of which is the extension on the global commitment waiver, exactly what that means in terms of where it stands on the full risk and budget neutrality, as well as we're getting a lot of emails on primary care services reimbursement should be increased. And then we have a recommendation from our Health and Welfare Committee around language to authorize a state plan amendment to cover postpartum services for 12 months. So those are just some things that while you're in here, we'd like to also, well, I'm speaking for myself, but that are related, particularly in the Medicaid arena. So we can get started, and if you have to come back, then we'll schedule it.
Okay, great. So the Agency of Human Services under the Budget Adjustment Act has reflected a $38 million request to the general fund. This represents a 3.7% increase in our overall budget. It is primarily due to caseload increases, rate adjustments, the ACO settlement, and recruitment and retention incentives that have been implemented. More specifically, the majority of that is related to caseload pressures and utilization in the Medicaid program for $67.5 million gross. This is due to the Medicaid federal suspension of the redetermination during COVID. In addition to that, the family services caseload has seen an increase, and that is an increase in the total cost per case, as well as an increase in the total number of cases for foster care, residential care, and adoption subsidies. The buy-in, the Department of Vermont Health Access has an increase of $5.8 million gross in order for the state to buy in to Medicare Part B premiums for individuals who are duly enrolled in Medicaid and Medicare. This specific...
Is that because of the cost of the premium going up so much or
Yep.
caseload?
That is directly related to the cost of the premium going up 14%. And as folks may recall, that the buying into the Medicare subsidy is a net savings, even though we have seen an increase in the overall premium costs. The next is a targeted case management increase, essentially in this area for the Department of Children and Families. It's an internal adjustment of the funds from the general fund, from global commitment funds to general funds for targeted case management due to the eligibility for federal fund reimbursement. For fiscal year, for calendar year 2020, the ACO agreement, as folks will recall, the agreement includes a payment to the ACO that's arranged at the beginning of the year, and if they come in with lower costs in healthcare, they get a payment up to that agreed upon price. In that assessment is a total payment of $15.2 million gross that was paid out under the contract to OneCare.
I think we may want some more understanding of that, because that's been a topic, obviously, of some criticism. And I know that that in many ways those payments, like in the mental health arena, actually help provide some financial stability during COVID, even though the volume of services declined. So if they had been in a fee-for-service environment, it really would have been very difficult. So I think we need to understand how maybe payments went out to the provider community to help provide that financial stability, as opposed to what that meant for the ACO itself. So one thing is adjustments because of the impact on providers in this payment arena, as opposed to somehow creating something that's advantageous to the OneCare MCO, and how you would recognize that financial dynamic and setting, future rates. So we won't need to get into it now, but obviously that's something that I think committee members need to understand better, because publicly, as you well know, there have been editorials or expressions of concern around that particular payment being made.
Yeah, absolutely, and we can definitely go into detail there. I am glad that you brought up that one of the things that the ACO fixed prospective payments did do during the pandemic is ensure, as hospitals' cases went down and as other providers' cases went down, it ensured a fixed prospective payment that went out to them, and we did see that ensure some stability in some of those sectors. We can come back with what we know, and then also encourage the ACO to share how we make payments to the ACO, and the ACO subsequently makes payments to providers. The last adjustment under the budget adjustment that Mr. Donahue will go through is that the Department of Mental Health and the Department of Corrections put in place retention and recruitment incentives, and the total gross up for that is $6.6 million, with the intention of recruiting and retaining staff where there were significant staff vacancies. This is in alignment with what Ina will also go through at the end, where we have been shoring up first an investment of $2 million in retention and recruitment payments out to the designated agencies. and then a proposed package of $33 million for recruitment and retention for healthcare providers over the coming year. And so Rich will go through that specifically. The one point that's important to note is that throughout the pandemic, we've done a significant amount of work to use the Coronavirus Relief Fund for stabilization of our healthcare and other components of our work, and also the FEMA funds for things like housing and other components. So really housing, testing, contact tracing. Those are things where we've really tried to leverage additional federal opportunities for funds here in Vermont. Again, at the end, I'll cover in detail with Ina what we're proposing in BAA Part 2 for continuation of healthcare stabilization and workforce retention and recruitment. But Chair, if you're okay with it, I'll hand it over to Rich to go into more detail.
Fine, we'll keep going.
Okay.
Going to the next slide. Or
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Kitchell and committee members. So what I'll do is just provide a brief overview of the high points of the ups and downs for the budget adjustment for the Secretary's office, the global commitment appropriation situated in the Secretary's office, as well as the highlights for our departments before Secretary Samuelson and Ina Bacchus dive into the details of the supplemental BAA. So with the Secretary's office, you'll see a net neutral transfer between the central office and DCF associated with the management of the 211 contract. That's a $532,000 gross decrease, but it's net neutral. You'll also see a net neutral transfer with VDH for a general fund carry forward, which helps the central office have a little bit more funding this fiscal year for the 1115 global commitment and APM waiver technical assistance contracts. And before I move on to the GC appropriation, I'll pause and see if anyone has questions.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Any questions? Those are kind of technical, just moving around. Okay.
Yes, and they're net neutral. In the Secretary's office global commitment appropriation, I just want to point out a few things. You all are familiar with the 6.2% enhanced FMAP bump associated with the suspension of Medicaid redeterminations for Medicaid enrollees. To the extent that that has occurred under the public health emergency period through March of 2022, there was a $66 million reversion of general fund from the global commitment appropriation to the benefit of the state's bottom line. And you'll see an increase in federal funds for the same amount. There's also a use of one-time general fund carry forward from state fiscal year 21 as matching funds. So that's a $6.8 million decrease in general fund match necessary in 22. Childless new adult caseload technical adjustment is a $9.6 million decrease in the need for general fund matching funds because of the enhanced new adult match rate. And then there's a small true up, relatively speaking, for CHIP qualifying claims of $584,000. And I'll pause there again to see if anyone has questions.
Questions? I'm looking to see. Nope. Okay, so those are all, you got downs and more federal funds. But in Medicaid, you need 26 million more in general fund. So is that on another slide?
It's on the next slide, in fact.
Oh, all right.
For DEVA, if you're referring to the global commitment consensus forecast.
Right, I am.
Okay, okay, very good. So the updated Medicaid consensus forecast, which will need to be adopted by the E-Board this month, resulted in a $66 to $67 million gross increase, or $28 million in general funds. I believe that's what you were referring to.
I think probably that's part of it. Yes.
Okay. And then as Secretary Samuelson had previously testified to, there's an increase in buy-in costs directly attributable to Medicare premium increases, the 2020 ACO settlement, which we also spoke of previously. And there's a Medicaid rate increase for participating providers of $4.7 million gross or $2.1 million general fund. And again, I want to pause there to see if anyone has questions.
Would you define participating providers? Are you talking about participating in the Medicaid program? Are you talking about participating in the ACO? I'm just trying to relate why we're getting all these emails about increased reimbursement for primary care physicians. Is this a connection between what we have here and the emails that we're starting to get?
I'm not certain about the connection between this and the emails you may be receiving. Be happy to follow up with you in more detail, depending on the context of the emails you're receiving. This is specific to a Medicaid rate increase for Medicaid participating providers. And this is part of the agency's initiative to move forward on the professionalization of rate increases, increasing the amount of transparency in the rate setting process for the legislature. So DEVA can provide more details regarding this particular line item, but that is the general summary for that increased need.
All right, we'll have further discussion around it.
Okay. So then moving on to DMH, there is an increased funding need for staff incentives and retention package for the psychiatric care hospital and secure residential facilities at DMH for $1.8 million gross, or the equivalent of $760,000 general fund. Is there a question?
I don't see any.
Okay, that will generally take the form of retention bonuses and shift differential pay, and DMH can provide more details to the committee if those are needed. There's also a 16-bed secure residential permanent facility startup costs. There's $150,000 general fund need. These are for incidental costs that aren't otherwise covered under the capital appropriations available for the secure residential facility. Okay.
I'm assuming that's for adults. Is that for adults, or is that for?
That's the Middlesex facility that's going to Essex now, I believe.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Thank you.
I have a question. As you're looking at your own staff incentives and retention issues for state employees, and here you've got Department of Mental Health, you have out in regions facilities as well. Some are for Dale that require secure settings. Some are mental health related. As you're looking at the kind of the alignment of what you need to stabilize or meet your service needs for state employees, is there comparability or the extent to which that workforce problem of incentives and retentions are being experienced much more broadly than simply state government?
So I would defer to Secretary Samuelson on this point, but I think many of your questions may be answered once we get to the supplemental BAA portion of the presentation.
Yes, Rich, that's exactly correct. Senator, we do recognize that there are issues in the broader provider network. We'll be presenting in BAA Part 2 a request for $15 million of state funds. And then we'll be also using $18 million of HCBS funds to provide retention and recruitment activities for organizations outside of state government that are part of our healthcare and human services network.
All right, well, we'll look forward to seeing what it looks like kind of in total. So I'll let you keep going. Sorry to keep interrupting, but.
No, that's perfectly reasonable and expected.
Well, or, you know, since I'm going to have to present the BAA, that's the practice, and you're getting into a lot of healthcare. The other thing is I can always set up a time to get into the weeds a bit more. So we'll keep going for Friday afternoon. This is probably a good start.
Okay. So if there are no other questions regarding DMH, then we can move to DCF. Across DCF, you'll see a series of adjustments to earnings due to capped federal funds, temporary staffing contracts, and other grants and contracts adjustments with a net $1.4 million general fund increase effect. And in the Family Services Division, you'll see adjustments to subsidized adoption caseloads, substitute care caseloads, and a targeted case management rate adjustment of $1.1 million general fund. In the CDD, Child Development Division, there's a subsidy caseload underutilization of $814,000 general fund, and an OEO. There is an emergency housing plan, including several initiatives totaling $6.1 million general fund. The largest portion of that is a $5 million rental risk mitigation pool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We heard about that yesterday. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions regarding DCF? Okay, then I'll move on to Dale. So in the Dale ups and downs, you'll see an initial funding phase for the long-term care oversight initiative. This is a relatively small amount of general fund carry forward that was available to allow the department to begin seizing on any opportunities should they arise for increased long-term care oversight. During the pandemic, agency leadership determined that increased forward-looking oversight of long-term care facilities was an apparent need. There's also a TBI utilization increase of $66,000 in general fund, and then the choices for care carry forward ups and downs that I'm sure you all are very familiar with, inclusive of the 1% reserve requirement.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So that takes us to the last slide I'll be presenting on, VDH and DOC. VDH is just a series of net neutral technical adjustments. There really is nothing going on there of note. And in DOC, similar to DMH, there's a recruitment and retention incentives package need of $4.9 million general fund, which includes retention bonuses for correctional officers and their supervisors, bonus structure for new hires and academy recruits, as well as shift and standby bonuses.
Okay, can I ask a question there? How many persons is your goal in terms of recruitment?
So that is a question I would ask the committee to refer to DOC on when DOC comes in to testify. I can reach out to DOC in the interim and get you a specific answer to that question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a particular concern because we're hearing that, in fact, officers are at mandatory overtime, weekends, and the vacancy rate is really high, very difficult to recruit, and people can, work long hours and under these circumstances for, not forever. And so it's important that we have some sense of the impact, the number of people involved, and also the success in attracting people to these jobs, which are really difficult because anyone who is being incarcerated now, it really presents a security risk. I mean, we don't incarcerate like we used to 20 years ago. So the population there is quite a concentration of criminogenic individuals.
So I will reach out to the Department of Corrections today so that we can get you an immediate answer regarding that specific question. And I'm sure they would be happy to provide more details when they testify.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're on the next slide, or is this still you, Rich? The supplementals?
I will be now passing the presentation along to Secretary Samuelson and Ina Backus.
Chair Kitchell, are there any questions on BAA 1?
Well, I don't see any at this point. As we get into it, we may have questions, and our staff can forward them and get answers. So I think we'll keep going.
Great. This may be helpful to one of the earlier questions that you did have. The increases in the budget for DIVA related to rate increases were under primary care, mental health, and specialists for professional services, outpatient hospitals, dental for the federally qualified health centers, and home health and hospice. So I would strongly recommend, if you're getting questions in those areas, that DIVA can give you the specific detail on the rate adjustments that they've done.
Okay.
So as a component of BAA Part 2 that you've received, the Agency of Human Services is requesting 2 buckets of funding. The first bucket of funding is $25 million to address emergent needs in our system. When I think of these two, we're really looking at this is our very short term, and we're really looking at this as stabilizing organizations that are in financial jeopardy of not being able to serve their current clients or of closure. The second bucket is a $15 million bucket, which will be paired with $18 million for a total of $33 million that will fund a structured set of retention incentives for current healthcare workers in order to help stabilize the system. To go into more detail on the $25 million, over the last year, the Agency of Human Services has received significant requests for stabilization in areas such as long-term care, the designated agencies, adult day providers, hospitals, and rehabilitation facilities, including those serving individuals who have substance use disorder. We've been able to utilize a combination of federal funds to support these requests, plus other typical relief efforts that are built into our budget process in the Agency of Human Services, such as requests for extraordinary financial relief. The agency continues, though at a slower pace, to receive these types of requests, with the end of the coronavirus relief funds, which were used to provide the healthcare stabilization, is requesting $25 million in order to continue to support organizations. In this bucket, there are some knowns, and those include executed agreements for subacute facilities. That's $5 million. $7.5 million to increase and enhance ICU capacity in direct response to COVID. And then a staffing contract that we have with the staffing agency called TLC for $2.5 million in order to provide extra support for organizations that are experiencing current outbreaks or outbreaks resulting in staffing shortages in order to shore up their staff. That totals a total of $15 million of currently executed agreements, all of which we will continue to seek federal fund sources such as FEMA as applicable to support, some of which have more, like the TLC staffing support contract, more opportunity and are lower risk than others. We also, based on the anticipation from what we have seen over the last year, are proposing an additional $10 million for those organizations who are in jeopardy and facing closure related to reduced capacity or other financial challenges. For those providers who are asking for the emergency funds, that they will apply directly through their departments of jurisdiction. They will be triaged based on need, and provider eligibility is encompassed to include the full spectrum of those that have previously received healthcare provider stabilization. The departments of jurisdiction will do a financial analysis of the need and look at processes such as the extraordinary financial relief process to see if they can cover it under the existing processes. And if not, that will be escalated to the AHS Secretary's Office, Financial Office for review. Their office will, in addition to doing a funding analysis, will look at the availability of funding through FEMA and Medicaid matchable funds through the Medicaid FMAP process. And based on that, anything above and beyond will be approved through beneficiary agreements and released. This follows a very similar process to what we feel like has been successful under the healthcare provider stabilization processes. Nina, do you want to walk through and describe for us the process for workforce recruitment and retention?
Yes, thank you. Act 155 of 2020 required the Director of Healthcare Reform to consult with an advisory group to update and maintain a workforce development strategic plan for the healthcare sector. And these recommendations here for a $33 million package to support recruitment, retention, and training for health providers are consistent with recommendations in the healthcare workforce strategic plan. In combination between the dollars already proposed in the BIA and now with those that we're proposing in the supplemental, we're looking at $18 million from Home and Community-Based Services FMAP to be used for recruitment, retention, and training of health providers, and for $15 million from general fund to be combined with those funds, again, for a total of $33 million to invest in recruitment, retention, and training for healthcare providers across the continuum. Moving to the next slide, the program that we're proposing would be a needs-based program for providers. We propose to allocate funds to address the most immediate needs across the continuum of care. And we're proposing an application process that would have a criteria for review so that we could understand the most critical needs for providers, ensure that these funds address those critical needs so that the providers are available to meet Vermonters' healthcare needs. We look for the funds to yield an immediate impact for providers in order to reduce current wait lists or expand occupancy, and to support employers with meeting their highest needs, such as vacancy rates. This funding can be used flexibly by employers for retention and recruitment incentives for those eligible employees. We would support the use of funds for relocation, for housing, for childcare, or other innovative incentives that could be utilized by employers to better recruit and retain healthcare professionals in light of the Great Resignation that is observed across the workforce, but particularly acute in the healthcare sector. This program would include a service agreement requirement so that employers that would be utilizing these funds for recruitment, retention, recruitment and retention specifically, would be looking for those employees benefiting from the funds to be working in a service agreement for a specified period of time, agreeing to work in Vermont for the employer. The retention, recruitment, and training funds also would support transition to practice programs for new nurse graduates for those particular employer types that may need extra support to bring on new nurse graduates into their facilities, to support those new nurse graduates with mentorship and training that could improve the rate of attrition among new nurses and make it more comfortable for certain employer types to bring on those new nurse graduates with the appropriate supports. And finally, we see these funds also being available to support securing international nurses with respect to the legal fees and other fees associated for international nurses.
I have a question. It's related, for example, nursing homes are having to bring in contract nurses and they're rate setted, and obviously their rates don't begin to reflect the higher cost. And I've heard the figure 40 million. Would relief or recognition of that cost to keep those programs operational be funded through, obviously rate setting is sort of a, retrospective, et cetera, process. It's based on occupancy of 90%, which obviously isn't happening. So would that be a provider group that would be helped through this, or is there another mechanism that you envision for those long-term care facilities?
That's a great question. I think that there is the extraordinary financial relief process that is available to our skilled nursing facilities. In addition to that, they will have access to both of these programs, the $25 million for cost above and beyond, and for the recruitment and retention efforts.
Okay, we'll keep going.
Senator, I think that's the summary of the two major components of the BAA Part 2. So I would at this point open it up to you for questions that you might have.
Any questions? Okay, I guess not. We'll have to see how it all fits together. Obviously, we're hearing from so many different provider groups and the impact. It's important to sort it all out. So we'll. Is that the end of the slides?
It is, Chair.
Okay. Other questions that have emerged. I realize I've kind of hogged all the questions, so I want to give the committee an opportunity to ask questions. So getting back to the primary care increases, could you explain the mechanics of this to me? So all our Medicaid, just a minute, somebody's at my door. Alice, you're just going to have to continue. I need to write a check for some of the workmen, and it's Friday afternoon, so I'm going to have to do it right now.
I think your question was directly related to the provider rate increases. I think the best department position to answer those is going to be the Department of Vermont Health Access. Again, the categories of places where we saw rate increases were in professional services, which included primary care, mental health, and specialty specialists, outpatient hospital, dental, federally qualified health centers, and home health and hospice. The dental rate increases, again, these are in BAA, are targeted to go into place on February 1st. And the other rate increases following BAA are targeted to go in place on April 2nd, 2022.
Rich?
Just to follow that up, specifically what we're getting is emails from people representing primary care and primary care doctors. So if we could get back with some information about that, it would help us answer those questions.
Right. So I've, Senator Westman,
and I suspect that Senator Kitchell is getting the same. So if you could pass along that that's the area that we need some background. I will tell you that I've had 5 since we started with you in the last hour.
I will definitely have Diva follow back up with the details of what those rate increases look like.
Yeah, and it's specific to primary care.
Anyone else have any questions? If we wait a few minutes, maybe Jane will have a few. One other thing I was wondering about with regard to retention of employees and the money spent there, how is it measured to see if what's being implemented has been the factor that's causing them to stay? Are there measurements in place to see what keeps employees there once you've done the incentives to them?
I know that the Department of Corrections answered a very similar question for House Appropriations Committee, and I could forward that response on to your committee, and we can follow up specifically with the Department of Mental Health regarding their request.
That would be good. Thank you. Jane, do you have any further questions?
No, I don't. Friday afternoon, everybody stops and wants to get paid. It's snowing out too. So I think for now we're probably all set for Friday afternoon, and we'll come back with as we get more questions. There's just a lot here. That's and I do think our concern is continuation of stabilization. We're hearing from our alcohol, drug, our substance use treatment facilities, residential facilities, in terms of it's their census and the workforce costs and so forth. So just a lot of things happening within your realm of particularly healthcare. So we'll be in touch. Other than that, I don't see any other questions. I'm sorry for the interruption, but I had to write a check. It's all money. Everything is money. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chrissy, so we are adjourning for today. So I would like to go offline, please.